beautiful Saturday morning to you. Happy Saturday, happy weekend. Hope you're geared up for a great weekend. We got the pipes of Kerry calling to us today. No, I love Ireland. My wife and I were there last a couple of months ago. I don't know. I can't wait. I do have an Irish accent. You had to take my word for it apparently this morning. No offense to my folk in Ireland. Pleasant Doom, happy weekend. Welcome. Thanks for joining us this morning. Good to see you as always. As I'm really excited to share a new show format with you today. I've finally got my ish together, and I know how I want these to roll out week to week. I was kind of juggling between, I wanted to be obviously D&D news oriented. I wanted us to be focused on the ongoings around the verse as they relate to Dungeons and Dragons and the hobby that we all love and share. And do something a little bit different. So what I came down to, let me just turn this down just a little bit. Easy, take it easy, Danny boy. Here we go. This makes me think of green rolling hills and sunshiny days, neither of which I see out my window in Canada. Hopefully the weather's better where you are in the world. Yes. What was I saying? Yes, that's right. New show format. So every day, week over week, we have great discussions on Twitter at Shambazzle Games. Follow me if you don't already. Get in on the conversation all day long. Tons of content related to D&D. Lots of great conversation and an amazing community who's extremely active, passionate, and we look out for one another. So if that sounds like you, come join us. So we'll start every Saturday show with a little bit of community news. We'll look back over the week on Twitter, some of the discussions that we saw really gain traction, and some of the topics that people were passionate about. We do a lot of polls throughout the week, too, so we'll talk about some of the results of the polls. And then once we're finished with community news around Twitter, we're actually going to go into some official news from the web as it relates to Dungeons & Dragons, whether it's from Wizards of the Coast, from the community at large, or from ongoings that are happening and relative to our hobby of choice. And all of this really kind of rolls up into the new podcast that I'm launching, which is a Dungeons & Dragons news-focused podcast and D&D talk in general. There are tons of great actual plays out there, lots of great DMTips podcasts. I wanted to do something that's a little bit different. So I'm going to try and keep up with that, and this will probably be the first episode that you're going to hear. So Pleasant Doom, you're part of Dungeons & Dragons history this morning. I hope you're excited as I am. What else? Yes, so after we go through news, we'll talk a little bit about all the things that you need to know from this week in Dungeons & Dragons, and then we're going to go into game prep. So that's the second half of the stream, which I use to actually prep my game. Today, that's going to be live map making, so we're going to jump back into Photoshop. We're continuing with photorealistic map making, but today I'm actually moving away from the learning phase that I was doing before. Pleasant, I apologize. I haven't had a chance to go into the amazing tutorials and the references that you sent me, so I might still be very Bush League today, but we're going to start from scratch with some cities and towns, random encounters that we're building in cities and towns. I'm doing this because the next segment of Charisma Check, my Tuesday live game, my Tuesday in-person game, I should say, is likely going to lead them to an area where we will need such maps. So, lots of good stuff to look forward to there. What's new with you, Pleasant Doom? Do you prefer Pleasant Doom or Angela? Is Angela the handle of choice? If you're new and you're just joining us, or if you're vet of the channel and you're just joining us, either way, say hello, good morning, throw me an emoji in chat, let me know you're alive. Highly interactive, engaging. We get some back and forth going here. Get the juices flowing. Get your body rolls warmed up. Angela it is. What was good for you this weekend, Angela? Or this week, Angela? Did you get out for Halloween? Halloween's one of my favorite holidays. Yes, holiday. Yes, holidays. I love it. My wife and I go pretty all out. We love to get into costume. We're actually hosting a Halloween gala this evening, so I'll probably be tweeting some stuff from there. Keep an eye out. Once again, at Shambazzle Games. Shameless plug. That's it. I won't hammer you with it. You know where to find me. But we'll have some good stuff coming out this evening. Doing some live tweets. I'll probably be more focused on cooking things and stuff like that. Lots of trick-or-treaters where you were. That's amazing. I've always loved Halloween as a kid. I loved going out for trick-or-treats. We traveled, man. We went far in my day. Like, we walked. The kids, I guess where I am, it's a fairly rural. Well, it's a urban area, they're calling it. So, like, the city creep is starting to come into my hood now. Lots of residences that are kind of packed together. So it's prime territory for trick-or-treating. This week, the poor kids got shafted a little bit. We had a torrential downpours and frigid cold. It wasn't great. I hated that when I was a kid. You wait all year long for Halloween to come around, and then boom, you get dumped on. But you know what? We trudged onward. We gathered our steam. We mustered our troops. Yeah, we had the kids got a little shafted this year in our hood. We had brutal rain and freezing cold. Not necessarily the best circumstances under which to hunt for loot door to door. But there's always next year, kiddos. If I was a parent at that point, I think I'd be like, you know what? F this. We're going to go to the grocery store. I'll buy you like $20 worth of candy. You'll have candy until June. And then probably immediately regret it as a parent. Yeah, Halloween, very cool. Tonight we host our Halloween party. My wife and I are going as, I'm going as Atreyu from Neverending Story. My wife is going as the childlike empress. And one of our other friends is going as Artak, the horse. And yes, she's dressing from white down to her torso. And she's wearing all black underneath to represent that fateful scene in the Swamp of Sorrows. You know it. You remember it. You've had nightmares about it. And you probably continue to have nightmares about it. And tonight we will personify it in costume and tribute. So, I'll have some pictures out on the Twitters for that. Should be good times, good times, good times. Buried in Killarney, oh, say he rose again, oh, say he rose again, oh, say he rose again, and joined the British Army. I love Irish music. Irish music and coffee. Try to fall asleep in the morning. I think I just died. I get to watch myself do that like 30 seconds later on monitor. And then I'm like, what are you doing, you weirdo? That's how we do. Lots of great convo on the Twitters this week. Lots of great ideas coming up and things that we're going to act on in the next little while. Of course, the website is a big focus for me, but we'll talk a little bit about that when we get into the strum this morning. What else happened this week? What else was good? I saw my first snowfall because Canada reasons. I'm not ready for snow at all. It was freaking October when it... Actually, no. It was November 1st, like clockwork. I got up at 5 o'clock, A to the M, and there was like this insane, nonsensical, friggin' apocalyptic snow blowing sideways across my window. And I worked from home that day. And all was calm in the household of Basil. We had, so snow already. It's gone now, thankfully, but not for long. I'm sure it'll be back. I want to go back to Ireland, man. Beautiful, beautiful land. Beautiful land. Not actually filled with ire at all. But no crafting. Oh. Actual dice attempt. Really? Oh, right. Sorry, that's right. We were talking about molds last week and getting into the dice artisan sphere. Okay, cool. But you're trying it. I mean, it's going to take a few attempts. I've got a lot of folks in my network who are dice crafters as well, and nobody ever knocked it out of the park on their first try. Takes a lot of time and patience. I admire you for that. Admirable for sure. But keep it up. And in short time, I'm certain you'll be pumping out gorgeous click-clack math rocks for the masses. And there seems to be a really huge market for it. Are you going to sell them, you think? You're going to like Etsy shop that stuff or Shopify it or something like that? Put them online? Make that money, girl. My ratio is a little off, so they're sticky, and figured out where my molds went wrong. Okay, gotcha. So are you just using like resin? Is there a standard resin or a specific type? I mean, you don't have to divulge your trade secrets, of course. I know that's a big part of the process. Once you get consistent quality, yeah, for selling. Nice, nice. Awesome. Well, we'll definitely be featuring you on our daily dice porn, which we do on Shambazzle Games. One of the many, many content pieces that we produce every day. And by we, I mean I mean us. I mean we as a community. Very cool. Oh, I'm excited for you. Keep us posted. Make sure you share some photos whenever you're comfortable doing so, and we'll shout them out. A couple of different brands of resin available where you're. Nice, nice. What area of the world is it? Are you in? Are you in the U.S.? Are you in Europe? U to the K. It was an exciting week in Dungeons and Dragons. I played twice this week. Again, we had our regular game, Charisma Check, on Tuesday, every second Tuesday night. The gang is headed towards their first big bad, named Nightlock, an archdemon, archfey. He's the antithesis or the arch nemesis of Tamison, played by Megasue13 on Twitter. In Minnesota, nice. Oh, it's chilly where you are too, yeah? If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, you got to get those dice out before the resin freezes as soon as it comes out of the boiler heater? What's the right term? I don't know. Clearly not a dice maker, but a great admirer of those that do. Yep. Winter is coming. Trademark. Winter is coming. I just made that up. Tell your friends. Yeah, the map turned out really well. Displayed to the television. Everybody loved it. They were very happy. I was very happy. And then I tried to kill them all. Otherwise, a standard successful Dungeons and Dragons session. I'm sure you'll agree. Yeah, we had they're on their way to fight Nightlock, and I would say they're getting very close. I can't divulge too much because they often see my stream or they'll see the replay. And as much as I love them, I don't trust them to completely not meta. So that's coming up, and in the next session, there's a very good likelihood that they will come face-to-face with the architect of their torment. And this is an individual who has tortured Tamison's family for decades, responsible for the death of their father, ultimately the death of their mother, but not in the trope sense. Her mother went on for years after, protecting the children, dispersing them throughout Faerun so that they would never come to harm or be more difficult to find by Nightlock and his ilk. They're starting to learn now as they explore the depths of Nightlock's end or Nightlock's hideout that he has clearly sacrificed his entire legion for a darker power. TBD. But they really are not sure what they're getting into, and I cannot wait. It's going to be amazing. Which reminds me, I gotta get those things edited because I'm almost ready to release the first season of Charisma Check. But I want to release them all in seasons because I don't have time to edit that one and keep up with it on a weekly basis. So the idea is to finish all of the Charisma Check episodes and then release the whole season. So we'll look forward to that. All right, how's everybody feeling? We're feeling warm, feeling good. Let's jump into some Dungeons and or Dragon news. It goes something like this. Ba-da. Many, many weird, wild, and wonderful things happening in the world of Dungeons and or Dragons today. Let me see if I've done this correctly and hopefully not screwed it up too badly. You ever have those moments where you were doing it right and then you undid it to be wrong? Kapla. This is how we're going to kick off the community news. We're going to take a look back over the week in Twitter. We had an amazing week of great content, great conversation. Some of you will be familiar with this, and if you don't, then follow me on Shambazzle Games. Get in on the conversation. We got some new notifications coming through. That's good. Like I said, our community is highly active. We do a lot of great things week to week. We do dice porn features. We do DM describes, where we have these really great fantasy vistas, and everybody jumps in and offers their description of it from a DM perspective or a player perspective or a writer perspective. Angela's quite versed in those. It's worth following just to see Angela's descriptions alone, but the whole community chips in, and it's a really great exercise. I think people are enjoying it, so we're definitely going to keep that up. We also have introduced a new segment called What Happens Next, where I'll describe a brief intro to a setting, and then the community kind of takes it away and talks about what they think would happen next or what they would like to happen next. It's a cool little creative exercise as well. We started a new weekly feature, so Monday is Plug Yourself. So I invite the community to share what they do or what they have done week over week. What else do we do? Oh my God, there's 20 plus things a day, every single day that we do. So we're never short on content there. I prep all that content over the weekend and get my mind thinking about what kind of questions do we want to talk about? What kind of polls do we want to ask of the community? And then we let it live throughout the week, and it just kind of breaks up the day. So I really enjoy it. And in the first segment of Speaking Common every Saturday morning in this very stream, what I'm going to do is we're going to start with those conversations and take out some of the highlights. So without further ado, let's take a look at what came up this week in the community. Last week, I actually petitioned the community for some feedback on what you wanted to see from the channel, how we wanted to elevate this as a community. So we started growing on Twitter. We're now almost at 3,000 followers. And when we do hit 3K, I'm going to start doing community giveaways. So I'm really excited about that, too. I actually petitioned the community on what you would like as giveaways, and resoundingly, a lot of it came back as dice and accessories, which is strange because I threw D&D books out there as well, but the community is far more excited about dice and accessories than they are about officially published materials, at least for the most part. Now, it doesn't mean we won't ever do that, but it means that when I do start giving giveaways, then my focus is probably going to be, or likely going to be, on dice and accessories as requested by the community. And the whole key here is that everything I do is driven by the community. We do a lot of back and forth. We're dice addicts. Yes, you clearly are. So we're gonna do that pretty regularly. But I want to talk a little bit about the D&D News podcast, which is the advent of this very stream. So all this throughout the week is really going to feed the new podcast that I'm going to be releasing. And this is related to D&D News, D&D Conversation, the things that we talk about as a community. So stay tuned for that. And it will be available wherever you choose to get your favorite podcasts. So we'll make a big noise about that when it comes around. The Dungeons & Dragons website that I'm creating at shambazelgames.com is coming along nicely. I've started building all the L1s or the landing pages. The landing pages and category pages. This is where I, as a marketer and an SEO, come into trying to really hunker down on the structure of the website and how I want it to play out. But I want that to be ready in time to host the podcast and all the great articles that we're going to be producing week over week. So I'll throw it out to you as a community. If you're a writer, if you like to blog, you like to write, get at me. My DMs are open on Twitter. I'd love to have you support and jump in and write some content for the site too if you're interested in something like that. I think it'd be a lot of fun. I asked the community last week if I were to go into another social property, what would you prefer? Or rather, where else in social medias do you get your Dungeons and Dragons info or intel? And without competition, Instagram was a clear winner, but a very close one was online and websites. So that kind of ties into those last two items that we're doing for the community. So I'm really excited about that. That'll be coming down the pipe, so stay tuned for news. Stay tuned for news. So Instagram, the website coming. And then in the comments, there was a lot of talk about Discord as well. So a lot of people really enjoy participating in the community on Discord. So what did I do? I asked the community, if we set up a Discord for D&D chat and community engagement, would you get on it? And we're going to come to that shortly. So giveaways, like I said, when we hit 3K, we're going to start doing community giveaways. Mostly dice and miscellany, I presume. Swag, schwaggity, loot, goods, merchandise. And we're going to get into it. Next up, we did a little thing of the many series that we do every day on Twitter at Shambazel Games. is one of them is DM describe. So dungeon masters describe the setting. This is one of my favorites. So we'll post a really nice kind of fantasy visual, and then the community jumps in to describe how they would describe this setting as a dungeon master or player or writer, what have you. And these always come around really well. I love this series a lot. I might start compiling these on the website, actually sharing them out, because they're so good. And people really enjoy them. I've had a lot of writers reach out to me and say, hey, I use this as my writing warm-up now, or this has really inspired something that I've done with a character. So a lot of people are getting involved there, and it's a lot of fun. So do jump on, join us, and get in on that action. One of the questions that arose this week in the community is, what's your favorite D&D 5e feat or ability? Now, as you know, or you may not know, in Dungeons & Dragons, in a lot of cases, classes and races have their own abilities that help you perform functions in the game world as your character. But there's also a customization option where you can choose a feature or feat that gives you a small set of abilities in lieu of choosing to increase your core abilities, your strength, constitution, dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, or charisma. And a lot of the community weighed in on what their feat was. We had some really good back and forth on this too. Tavern Brawler, Linguist. We had a lot of Magic Initiative was a really big one, which gives you some spellcasting ability up front. Sneak Attack from Rogues, definitely a good one. Ability Cunning Action. As Rogues, you get a Cunning Action, which lets you take a free bonus action to disengage, dodge, do a lot of really great utility options as a Rogue. So we had some really great back and forth. So I asked you, the community, what is your favorite feat? Get at me at Shambazzle Games, weigh in on this post. It took off really well, and it got a lot of really great insight as to what people are choosing as players in Dungeons & Dragons. So somewhat of a hot button topic that blew up in the community this week was, how do you feel about paying a dungeon master to run a game, and what would you expect to pay and receive? And I was mulling over this last week because as Dungeons & Dragons continues to elevate in popularity, particularly in the digital landscape, we see a lot of, or it's given rise to a lot of dungeon masters who are offering their abilities as professional services. Now, my personal take on this is fine. I don't, if somebody's following their dreams or making a buck at it, good for them. I don't think, I'd ever throw shade at somebody for doing that. But what are the expectations then around it, I think, is where the conversation gets really interesting. So community weighed in spades on this one this week. We had tons and tons of comments about it. Really great conversation. A lot of differing views from, there's no way it should be monetized. This is capitalism at its finest, to, I'm all for it. If we can make a living doing what we love to do, then why not? And I think there are valid arguments on both sides, honestly. So these are the types of debates that we sometimes explore as a community. It's highly respectful. We always make sure that we're conscious of everyone's opinion and their ability to have it. And I thought this went really well, but it was really insightful to get a sense of where people are at with the, let's say, monetization of Dungeon Master skills or the game in general. Now, of course, the beauty of Dungeons and Dragons is it's more or less free. There's literally no financial barrier to entry, but in cases where, if you're setting up a really professional game or a professional experience, or you feel like you do it particularly well, how can you make money at it? And to me, this is akin to, putting up a Patreon or a coffee or being paid by a store to run games. Realistically, like in any case, all we're talking about is an exchange of services for money or services for goods. And in a lot of cases, it seemed like the community felt better about a DM being paid than they did generally about a group of players paying the DM, unless it came down to like goods or credit. So the happiest medium seems to be where the Dungeon Master receives store credit for running a game in a store, or if everybody kind of chips in on the materials, or even something as simple as like, the DM runs the game and everybody else brings the snacks. But some kind of like barter. It was really cool and interesting to see how people process that idea and the varying opinions on how it could or should be manifested. So again, one of the many great conversations that we had. In news on the community, we talked a little bit about the Eberron campaign that's coming, Oracle of War, in the Adventurers League system. This is a precursor to the Eberron Rising from the Last War module that's coming out in December, I believe. A lot of fans of the Eberron setting who really enjoy it. I'm starting to get into it myself and learn a little bit more about it. I think it's very cool. It's got a lot of great offerings, but Wizards definitely taking a vested interest in Eberron a little bit more intently over the next couple of months. So it'll be fun to follow that and see how this new rollout of adventures through Adventures League is going to lead up to the launch of the Eberron, the next Eberron Compendium from Wizards, the next officially published material. So we'll keep an eye on that. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in the news shortly. And Kobold Press actually just launched a Kickstarter for a new compendium called Deep Magic, and this is a representation of some 600 odd spells, new spells, spell effects from designer Jeff Lee. And we posted an interview with Jeff Lee on the Kickstarter. So if you're interested in that, check out the link on Twitter or just search for Deep Magic Kobold Press. There's a lot of great video content there and information on what they're doing. And this gets into the 3P or the third-party Dungeons & Dragons content. While Kobold Press is a very close, high-profile partner to Wizards of the Coast, they've done a lot of officially published stuff too. So you can rest assured that anything that comes through here is probably going to be pretty tight. It's going to be fairly well balanced, and it's going to be very well ingrained in the Dungeons & Dragons published materials. So do check that out. We talked about that in news. And finally, from around the community, we took a look at 10 great ways for a DM to kickstart a Dungeons & Dragons campaign. This came up on the Gamer website, or thegamer.com, so do check them out as well. There's a lot of really great content. They do a ton of great work in lists, which I really like. They're kind of bite-sized, really quick tips, things that you can bring in and use in your game today. So get in there. If you can't find the link, it's up there on @ShamBowserGames at Twitter. You'll find it in the feed. But a lot of really great things that are different than the typical, you meet in a tavern or you're guarding a caravan. Some of the tropes that we tend to fall into, which are perfectly fine, but it's nice to shake it up once in a while, and this might give you some tools to do that for your game and your party. So, or to suggest to your DM or your GM. So check it out too in thegamer.com. Great site that we pull a lot of news from. A lot of fun there too. I'm going to dive into DM tips and player tips. Every week, every day, we share at least one Dungeon Master or one player tip that you can bring into your game week over week. These are pretty valuable, I think, anyway, and they come from my brain or they come from the community. So the first DM tip we shared last week, when working around the table, set a mental timer or even a 5 to 10 minute timer on your phone to make sure every PC gets some love. The key there is to make sure that, oftentimes you're working around the table, things are happening differently. The party may split, which we know is always a good idea. And when that happens, make sure that you set a mental timer, or even, like I said, a 5 or 10 minute timer on your phone, just to make sure that you're moving around the table. Because even as DMs, it's very easy for us to get locked into a conversation or a scenario where we're not, we're not doing that. We're not pushing around the table maybe as quickly as we could or should. So make sure that you're giving everybody at the table some love, that you're getting around there. Everyone's getting their time to shine in the spotlight, and this will help you do that. The second DM tip for the week is when writing, use as much detail as you can. But when you're writing session notes, try using short, sweet reminders that highlight those details. These are far easier to reference in the moment. And this is a particular practice that I've brought in my game prep, where when I'm planning and I'm ideating behind the scenes, like days before the session or weeks before the session, I'm going to as much detail as I can. This lets me blow out the world around my players. Now, this doesn't mean I'm going to railroad them. It just means that I'm going to fully understand, like, every blade of grass, every thought that's happening in the world around them, so that they can do whatever they want, and I'm always ready to at least improv that. For example, if they're in a town and they're doing something at a festival, then I'm thinking about what's happening at the festival. I'm thinking about what kind of vendors are there. I'm thinking what kind of wares are available for purchase. I'm also thinking about what the city guard is doing. I'm thinking about what the underlying sects of the town are doing, these guilds that are playing against their own means. I'm thinking about what the traffic is like coming into and out of the town. I'm thinking about what the weather's like. I'm thinking about what season it is. I'm thinking about what kind of traffic is going on around the town and what kind of political environments are affecting the town at the time. This is what I mean by going into detail in the planning. But when you build your session notes, keep it to short bullet points, so need to know things that are happening in the moment. For example, what's actually happening at this festival. These are 10 vendors that they can go to see. Here are a couple of bullet points on each vendor, so that when you're in the session, you're referencing those notes. You've done the thought work behind the scenes just to make sure that you understand how the broader story is playing out. But you can zero down on the moment that the characters are in then too in your session notes. And when you're in the game, we know it's impossible to keep all those balls in the air, so that those short, sweet, detailed session notes will help you be reactive to your players in what they're doing and what they're doing now. That's the idea there, not railroading. That was a little long-winded. Moving on to the next DM tip we shared this week. Everyone at the table wants you to be successful. They're in your corner. Don't stress. Have fun and laugh with your table every chance you get. This is one of my favorites. I always remind myself, this is something I bring into my professional life too when I'm presenting as well. Just remember, everyone there wants you to be successful. They're there with you. It's not a versus thing. You're not playing to an audience. I mean, you are in a certain sense, but your players want you to do well, and they want to have a great experience too. So when you have those moments as a dungeon master or a game master, or you're thinking about those moments, just remember that the people around the table are your friends. They want this to be good too, and they're rooting for you. They're not waiting for you to screw up, you know what I mean? And all that self-doubt and imposter syndrome that tends to come in that we love and know so well. Just keep that in mind when you're dungeon mastering, when you're behind the scene, or when you're game mastering behind the screen rather, that you got friends at the table, and that's why they're there, so never forget that. We always do at least 2 player tips a week as well. The first player tip we shared this week was share the love and wealth with your party. Nobody likes a loot or attention hog. There's another word for it too. I'm sure you know what it is. We've all been at the table where you've got, grabby McGrab hands. He seems to be scooping up all the loot, scooping up all the cash, the coin, the jewels. And that's not really a lot of fun for everybody because everybody puts in the effort, everybody puts in the time. So be a good player, be a good community member, and make sure that you share the wealth, Maybe you don't need to be like literally a mannequin for ancient relics. You can actually share some of that stuff around the party and make sure that they're having a good time and that they're reaping the rewards for the work that they're doing in the adventure as well. So don't be a loot hog. Nobody likes it. Don't be that person. The second and final tip that we issued this week, another player tip, kind of speaks to the last one. Assign a group treasurer and try to split funds and decisions equally around the party. As in life, infighting over money/loot can easily ruin a good thing. And I really do try to adhere to this. I usually insist in session 0 that the group assign a group treasurer to handle and manage all the group's funds. What you can do then, it allows you to make it somebody you trust, obviously, proviso. Sometimes what usually comes from that then is you can see, once you start to establish a fairly healthy amount of wealth, then you might chip out some to the party. So let's say if you're sitting on 1,000 gold pieces, they might say, hey guys, let's split some of this up. We'll keep 500 in the coffers or in the kitty, and we're going to share out 100 gold each so that everybody has their own income. They can do whatever they want with, but then the larger pool becomes part of a party decision, and then the party gets involved around this. I've seen this create some really great dynamics at the table. It makes wealth management and loot management more of a party decision instead of one person kind of running away with the game, which, like I said, is not usually fun for anyone. Next up, as I mentioned, we do a lot of polling throughout the week at Shambazzle Games on Twitter. We always petition the community for feedback to understand how I want to create what type of content and how the community prefers to be involved. So that's a big component of mine, and I take a lot of value from this every week. So one of the polls that we sent out this week was about what day our community prefers to grab or hear new podcast episodes. Resoundingly, Monday, out of 109 votes, Monday was the clear front runner here. Friday was pretty close, and Sunday got a respectable mention as well. Outside of that, in the comments, there was a lot of call out for Monday or Sunday, rather, or weekend releases of podcasts. A couple of people preferred Wednesday. So obviously across the board, it was there was a lot of variety. But Monday was a clear front runner. Sunday coming up pretty close to between votes and comments. So what that tells me is that when we do start to release this, I'm probably going to look to release it on a Monday. And then down the road, I might do an early release on a Sunday or something like that. All drawn by community feedback and polling. So thank you very much for being involved. And thank you very much for giving me your voice. It has been heard and will be acted on like everything that I try to do. And the final poll or the final highlight from Twitter news around the community this week was a poll about Discord specifically. So you remember in the beginning we were talking about asking the community what they wanted from social media, what they wanted us to engage in, how they wanted to receive this type of content. Discord was a big proponent as well, and I was not expecting that, but I just put it out to the community a couple of days ago. This poll is actually still running, I believe. And I asked, if I launched a Discord for real-time D&D talk, community chat, and games, would you jump on it? And out of 100 votes, 63% said hells yeah. And in the comments, there was a lot of really great feedback about how to do that, what they would expect from Discord. So I hear you, community. I'm going to be working on setting up that Discord this week. As you can see, if you're watching the stream, I actually do have a Discord, but it's become somewhat stagnant. I haven't gotten to it because I really just didn't have time when I originally did all this to set up a Discord. So it's there. It's not terribly active right now. There's a lot of work that I have to do with it. I want to get the right bots in place, want to create the right channels, and make sure that it really is a D&D focused community conversation hub. And I think that's what I was missing when I first launched it. I had some feedback from my Twitch community. They wanted a Discord server. I was like, sure, here you go. But I didn't really do much with it after that because I didn't have the time. So I think going at it with a focus, knowing what we want Discord to be as a community, is going to really help us nail down and double down on what that looks like moving forward. So stay tuned. Fam. Lots of really great things coming at you on the horizon for Twitter, for Shambazzle Games, and this amazing community who all love Dungeons and Dragons. All right, next up, we're going to pop into Dungeons and Dragons news from around the web. We're going to start by talking about Lucca Comics and Games in Lucca, Italy, 2019. This is a big one for a lot of community members, and actually Wizards has invested pretty thoroughly in this. Lucca Comics and Games Convention Lucca, Italy started October 30th, runs until November 3rd, and it's hailed as one of the largest live Dungeons & Dragons conventions in existence. It's set in Lucca, Italy, and enjoys an attendance of more than 200,000 fellow gamers currently. This is how many are actually enlisted and purchased tickets so far as it continues its run until November 3rd. Over 200,000 people just like us who enjoy Dungeons & Dragons, enjoy gaming. It seems like a lot of fun. Definitely check it out. Do some looking around on Lucca Games. There's a ton of really cool things happening there. Of course, live streams happening all week on the D&D channel covering this and some of the great things they have. So live streams coming at you with Dungeons & Dragons gaming, keynotes, celebrity interviews, and vendors, distributors. Lots and lots of live Dungeons & Dragons games happening at the convention. It's a huge deal. If I was anywhere close to Italy, I would absolutely be going here. But of course, I'm Canadian, so it cost me like $1 billion to get to Italy. But that day is not today, unfortunately. One of the greatest highlights there is that they're actually running a massive Adventures League epic to herald the Descent into Avernus module. It's called Devil Deals. The AL release was Descent into Avernus convention epic called Devil Deals. That's what I was trying to say. So it's got this. It's calling it the Vortex of D&D. And the greatest Dungeons & Dragons epic ever. So big shoes to fill there. It sounds like a pretty cool campaign. If you're familiar with Adventures League, then you'll know usually conventions receive an epic adventure, basically. And they're large group adventures that you can only play at the convention. It is part of the Adventures League series. And usually whenever Wizards releases an official module like Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus, it's usually accompanied by a series of Adventures League modules as well that kind of lead up to or take place around the compendium that build out the backstory a little bit, help you get into it as a character, and bring people into group play around these new modules and releases. So at Lucca Comics and Games Convention this weekend, they're actually launching a massive 10,000 person epic quest to do this. So that's their convention epic. We'll come back to that in just a minute. So like I said, they're calling it the Vortex of D&D and the greatest D&D epic ever. So huge claims. I guess we'll have to stay tuned and see what they do this week. But on the menu for this live streaming and everything they're showing is a live Dungeons and Dragons game. The convention is going to highlight D&D notaries like Joe Manganiello, comedian Paul Foxcroft, and some notary community members like Mark Sherlock Humes and Kim Richards as well from the podcast and actual play sphere. So might be worth checking out if you're into that kind of thing. Definitely take a look at their live streams. The actual play that Joe Manganiello is hosting is actually being held inside a real dungeon in the centuries-old San Columbano dungeon. So this is an ancient structure that they're actually going to be playing in. That's pretty cool. I mean, who didn't dream at some point of playing Dungeons and Dragons in a dungeon? You know, I can spare the dragons, but playing in the dungeons sounds pretty cool to me, I guess. So, there's something to check in on if you got time, if you're spending time on the Twitch after my stream, of course. check out what they're doing on the D&D channel for the Lucca Games Convention this week's end. In other Wizards of the Coast news, Wizards acquired Took Games in Montreal, and this is a really great burgeoning, fledgling studio, but it's made of some veteran game designers. So they haven't really said much about what project they're working on. Wizards and Took both being fairly tight-lipped about the new game, but that's all they really said is that they're working on a new Dungeons & Dragons game. Now, it's a brand new initiative for both. In fact, it's so new that the studio itself, Took Studio in Montreal, seems to have ramped up hiring devs and designers to jumpstart the project. So a lot of studios are always looking for new talent, of course, but this one was directly linked to the announcement they made for this new Wizards of the Coast Dungeons & Dragons title that they're working on. So we don't really know much about what kind of game it is. It is a video game as opposed to a tabletop game. But I took a bit of looking around on Took's other published offerings, and they only have one real game that they've published called Livelock. And it's like an isometric top-down shooter. It's a 3-player co-op. It looks really good. It's gorgeous visually, and it looks to play very smoothly, very, very like Diablo style. So I don't know if this means that, are they kind of keeping them in their lane, and is it going to be some kind of like a Diablo-type playthrough experience? But let's remember that... They have a current partnership with the developers who gave us Divinity and Divinity Original Sin, which is very similar to like a more of a turn-based isometric top-down Diablo style game. So I don't know if they would do the same with Took, but maybe it's a little bit more action-oriented. I'm purely speculating. Obviously, there are virtually no details out right now other than the fact that Wizards actually acquired the studio. This is a pretty big move, though, because they own the studio and they own the IP. So it's a bit of a different move for them. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out, and hopefully we'll look forward to some information, some announcements coming through. What we do know is that it will be a AAA title, and the acquisition was confirmed in a media release issued by Wizards of the Coast on October 29th. It's that new. So it's lots of cool stuff to keep an eye out for in the video game sphere, if that's your jam as well. A lot of really great work done in here, so they seem to have pretty good chops as a dev company. Just play this really quickly, but I'm going to shut the sound off just so you can see the... Nice. As they brand someone with the Livelock symbol. But it's super smooth. So the gameplay looks really smooth. Hopefully this isn't too choppy on stream because that will kill the... what I'm trying to articulate here, but each player, each avatar having their own kind of abilities. It looks like you've got your tanky style, you've got your range, your DPS style. Again, 3-player co-op, and I think that's key. I think it'd be cool to see what they're going to do in the cooperative space in a Dungeons & Dragons game. I think that's something that would be really neat to look forward to. So, the third item we're going to jump to is the new release, or the newish release of Tyranny of Dragons. Of course, it hits shelves on October 22nd. Now, why, you might ask? Why are they re-releasing Tyranny of Dragons? Well, it's one of the first full editions that was split across 2 books and released for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Can you believe it? 5 years ago. D&D 5e came out 5 years ago in 2014. This was designed to take players from level 1 to 15, and they've re-released it. They said it's best suited for groups of 4 to 6, as it was when it came out, but of course it's easily modifiable and malleable for groups that are a little bit smaller or larger, as most of the new modules that we're seeing coming out seem to be. But Tyranny of Dragons is really that kind of archetypal adventure that's set in a fantasy setting that involves dragons and loot and warring factions and all the things that really kind of make Dungeons & Dragons great, that really resonate with players. So They released this 5 years ago. Obviously, they've learned a lot, and they've received a ton of feedback from players in those 5 years. So it makes sense that they would retool this and give it a more of a kind of ceremonial release 5 years down the line. I'm really excited for this because this was the first real published module that I started to play as a player. Unfortunately, that game fell apart. I'll cry about it later. But also one of the first ones that I was interested in running as a dungeon master, too, because of those kind of cookie-cutter, templated. That sounds like a negative a negative statement, but it's really not. Like, sometimes you just really want your dungeons and your dragons, right? So I think it's cool that they kind of released this. There are a lot of really great highlights around it. So the new revamp, as I mentioned, was released on October 22nd. Runs for about $50 in hardcover. Now we're going to talk a little bit about summary. So there's spoiler alerts here. This is your warning. This is your spoiler alert warning. So fast forward if you don't want to hear much. We're not going to give too much away, but we are going to summarize the adventure. So in Tyranny of Dragons, it really centers around the cult of the dragon, who are trying to summon the evil draconic goddess Tiamat to wreak havoc on the prime material plane from her banishment in the 9 hells. So she's a god. She's a representative of all dragons. She's a 5-headed dragon, effectively, worm. With heads that represent all the chromatic types, so black, red, white, blue, and green dragons. So if that doesn't sound like an epic fight, then I don't know what does. But effectively, the cult of the dragon are going throughout the realms trying to curate tribute to raise her from this, or rather summon her to the prime material plane from the 9 hells. And that requires a lot of gold, a lot of magic items, a lot of jewels, and a lot of the great things that reason why adventurers do what they do and why you might get involved in a campaign like this. So the characters are thrown into a dragon attack on a small town called Greenest, which is, again, very archetypal. You have to sneak into the town. You have to make your way through an embattled town and rescue it from this attack. It actually starts out as a kobold attack that's split up by an attack of another type of dragon, and then things escalate from there in the small town, and that's how the story kicks off. We find that the players from there uncover a deeper plot to nurture a layer of dragon eggs, which are all tied to a deeper plot to, of course, bring Tiamat in from the 9 hells. The characters have to continue to investigate these activities of the cult while navigating the agendas of some of Faerun's most notorious guilds, including the Zentarum and some of the other popular factions that you may or may not know about, but they really add a nice flavor to play. So lots of great stuff going on there. I want to just jump in really quickly to a video. So this video actually aired originally when Rise of Tiamat was split out and produced. Again, I mentioned it was broken into 2 books. So those 2 books were Hoard of the Dragon Queen, which is the first part of the adventure, and then Rise of Tiamat, which was the second and penultimate half of the adventure. So when they launched, they actually produced this video that talks a little bit about what players can expect from the campaign and promotes the campaign. Let's take a look. Rise up or bow down as the video completes. Really cool. I wish they would do this for every single release, but I don't know. I guess it's pretty costly to do, so I understand why they might not. But it's a pretty neat it's a pretty neat accompaniment to any release, and it gives you a little bit of context about the story. Obviously, Tiamat coming up from the depths as they're pouring these tributes, gold and gems and things like that into the summoning chamber. I wish that they would do this with every single release and have a little kind of intro promo video, but I think Wizards is trying to figure out what the right mix of them is for promoting and pushing these works out into market. So it's neat. What we really want to know probably is what's different, right? So what's different about this release of Tyranny of Dragons versus what was previously released? Well, both adventures, as I mentioned, are combined into one, so that's a big plus. Instead of having to jockey for two different published campaigns or hardcover books, you got them all built into one now. There are no major plot changes to the story, but the story intro into the campaign has been reworked based on years of fan feedback, so they've really taken that into heart. They've rewritten how the intro story kind of blends in. They've done some really great padding of the content around the book, so they give us a lot more context on the factions at play, how to lead in as a DM. So they blow out the story hooks a little bit more. So it's just a better experience from a Dungeon Master's perspective or Game Master's perspective as well. So definitely recommendable for that as well. They've smoothed some of the transitions between story sections and adventures in the new release as well. So something to look forward to there. There was a significant amount of art inclusions and redesigns, including the new alternate style cover, which you can see there on the screen. It's this kind of matches the new alternate covers that they've been releasing for these. Now, apparently on release, this was only available in game stores, so only available at your friendly local game store, which is a really nice throw to bricks and mortar merchants who've had a reasonably tough time with everything kind of going digital and coming through in digital. There's not a huge amount of margin on these books, so it's nice for them to give some exclusivity to merchants who own shops and stores, which is really where a lot of us, I think, were introduced to this or had that experience of going to the store to purchase your Dungeons & Dragons books. So it's nice that Wizards playing into the bricks and mortar merchants that way as well and giving some exclusivity that they can offer fans to purchase a different version or some unique artwork, things like that. Little touches that might make it just a little bit more attractive to actually get to the gaming store and pick up your stuff there. There are extra PC and NPC backgrounds, some all-new backgrounds that are coming in now, which makes them official play, which is really good. So if you're the type of game master that really likes to keep the content that you offer at the table to officially published materials, then there are some 16 new backgrounds and NPC options that are being published with this or have been published with this new version of Tyranny of Dragons as well, including new magical items as well. So there are new magical items in the new appendices that are involved, or new entries for those magical items, so they're easier to peruse, browse, and award. And completely new political and faction reputation tracking tools. So there are new appendices that'll let you that'll help you to track how your players are doing against various factions that are at play, both here and in other campaigns too. So some new tools that are definitely transferable, whether you're playing Tyranny of Dragons or bringing them into other campaigns that you're playing, whether it's homebrew or third party or what have you. All new monster and creature appendices are included in the remake, which is pretty cool. So a lot more accessible there. New monsters that are not represented in the monster manual, apparently, from what I read. So new appendices for monsters and creatures there. And of course, we mentioned last week the errata has been included. It's been built into this publish. So errata corrects and smooths out critical encounters and story pivots in the game that have been worked into the complete work now. And there were definitely some mechanics that were basically stacked against the players, completely reworked, looking pretty good. Definitely on my list. I like it a lot. And this is something that I would really like to run for a group. Like I said, that penultimate kind of archetypal Dungeons and Dragons experience represented here in Tyranny of Dragons. So definitely recommend you check it out. From here, we jump into Dungeons or D&D Beyond, actually. So D&D Beyond is something that I have a love-hate relationship with. Really, I just I'm starting to get comfortable moving more digital with what I'm doing. I will never fully take the romance of tactile gaming away from the table. But digital definitely has some merits, not only in its ability to allow us to run games the globe over and break down barriers like scheduling, timing, time zones, and such. What I really like about D&D Beyond is that it's creating a bit of a playground for players. There's a lot you can do in the freemium version. There's a lot you can do free of charge before you have to actually subscribe to the platform. You can build characters. You can explore feats and options for your characters as you're building them in for your home games too. And most recently, they released the Encounter Builder, which is currently still in beta. This is really exciting to me because I previously had developed a tool called around an encounter sheet rather that would allow me to kind of pre-build my encounters before I got in the game, which took a lot of the work and page flipping out of the mix when we were actually in session. This is really a digital format of that, which takes all the math and the formulaic involvement in encounter building, or what I would consider the not so fun parts, out and automates it, which is perfect. So it's in beta. We'll take a look through here, but effectively out of the gate, it's a super easy point-and-click option for devising fast and ready encounters for your home games. It uses a balancing quotient from the Dungeon Master's Guide, which I tend to stick to. So when you're looking through the random encounter section of the Dungeon Master's Guide, there are formulas about, what level are your players, how many players do you have, what's the spread across varying levels if they are different levels, and how you can throw or what's the threshold for throwing a certain challenge rating of creatures at that player to either make it an easy, hard, easy, difficult, hard, or deadly encounter. So you can scale the actual difficulty of the encounter. So that's a formula that I tend to stick to at the table. Now, it's not perfect, obviously. It's more of like a reference as you're going through. Nothing is perfect, nothing's that scientific, but it does at least give you some benchmarks for when you're building an encounter so that your characters are challenged, but it's not over-tuned or under-tuned. And this is by far a lot of the conversation that I see happen in the community regarding, like, how do I create the right type of encounter, or do I slide the scale mid-encounter if I think it's too difficult? At least this lets you get a good start out of the gate on an encounter and balancing it or tweaking it for the party that you have. And then you can just kind of let it run and not worry so much about the formulaic elements like I mentioned. So that takes this into effect, and we can see that up in the top right-hand corner here where it's got the thresholds for the encounter summary. Now, this is really cool to see in effect. You won't get this on the podcast, but do check out the YouTube or the highlights after, because this is really great in practice. And as far as I know, there's no gate here, so anyone with a D&D Beyond login can check this out, or a Twitch account. You can link your Twitch account to D&D Beyond, and you can actually go in and play with this yourself. So we're going to demo it in just a moment. But before we do, we got some early feedback from users who feel like the tool, some of the concerns they voiced, that the tool might have some questions around balance. But if you're used to the DMG or the Dungeon Master's Guide quotients for building encounter thresholds, I think it's fine personally, and I've played with it a little bit. I think the balance looks great. And then of course it's not a de facto be all and end all, right? It's a great starting point as a DM for you to very quickly build out an encounter, but then you've got to kind of take it out of the tool, tweak it a little bit for your party. And this is going to change depending on your party dynamics as well, right? So for example, with Charisma Check, my party's been playing together for 2+ years. They've got a really great sense of what one another can do and is capable of in combat. They've developed synergy, and that's the key. If your party has a great sense of synergy, then they're going to be able to take on greater challenges than what you might mathematically expect a party of that size or level balance or average is going to be able to do. So I never throw anything at my players that's less than deadly, honestly, because they've just become so good working together that's the only way I can really challenge them or deplete their resources or manage their resources as they're playing through the campaign. So like I said, take it with a grain of salt. It's a great way to quickly build a balanced campaign against your characters, but then you want to tweak it for your specific players because no two parties are exactly the same, of course. I think what I love about it is I don't really use the more involved mathematics of group enemy multipliers. So there's a convention whereby if you have multiple creatures that you're throwing at your party, it actually multiplies their creature rating, or the challenge rating rather. And I don't really play into that. That gets too mathy for me and not fun. So I've really kind of disposed of that. But I feel like the tool itself works really well. The action's smooth. It does all the math for you, which I love, love, love. And well, that's enough talking. Why don't we jump into a demo here and actually play with this? So we'll hop into the D&D Beyond Encounter Builder. Hillbilly DM, welcome, welcome, welcome. Who brought some coffee? My brain's a bit sluggish. I'm still fighting that. We're an hour into the stream now, and I'm still trying to, get my ass in gear. I use the crap out of D&D Beyond. Yeah, and we were just saying, and everyone, if you're just joining us, say hello, throw me a follow. Don't be shy. We're highly interactive. This is all about in the back and forth. We're talking right now about D&D Beyond and the new Encounter Builder, which is currently in beta. Anyone can access this, so definitely jump on and play with it. Hillbilly, have you tried this out yourself? Like I said, the action's really good. So let's jump out of the top and let's get in here. Name your encounter. Let's call it at Shambazzle Games on Twitter. So I can sneakily, shamelessly plug the lifeblood of everything that we do. Join me on Twitter at Shambazzle Games. Let's get at it. Let's move on. Number of characters, average party level. So let's manage the characters that we're putting into this encounter. Let's say we've got a party of 5. Very quickly, we bring this up. Party of 5. We'll make it easy on ourselves. Let's say the average level is 6th level. So let's just say that everyone is 6th level. It updates in real time, and already now you can see the experience thresholds on the right side changing to reflect whether these are, deadly, hard, medium, or easy encounters, whatever we want to create. Now, this is where we get into the meat, so we can actually select what type of monster filter. So if I want a challenge rating of 5, because let's say 5 to 7, because my players have an average level of 6, I simply slide the scale on the left side, or move the slider to between 5 and 7. And guys, I've been wanting this for such a long time. It actually compiles all of the characters who are created everywhere, including homebrew that are uploaded to D&D Beyond and published materials based on their challenge rating. This is huge. I would use this tool for this alone, just pulling up characters that exist in a challenge rating so that I can then pull from it and find out what's going to apply to my characters. There's a little drop-down menu where you can show both homebrew and official. I tend to stick to official, particularly for my main home game. So I'm just going to check the show official only option, and that's going to compartmentalize what it's showing me for these challenge rating creatures to only officially released materials. I like a lot. My only problem is there's no way to organize the encounters into folders yet. Yeah, and see, this is the beauty of beta. Hopefully they'll, people are giving that feedback and we can find ways to more succinctly organize the encounters that we're creating. At the very least, I might build this and then print it just so I have a reference for my home game. But yeah, you're right. It would be nice to be able to bring that in. You can filter down by size. So now we've got our list of creatures who are between challenge rating 5 and 7. We can adjust it by size, tiny to gargantuan. Let's say I don't want gargantuan. Don't want huge. I want at least small to large. So I'm going to restrict my list even further. Monster type, you can choose between aberration, beast, celestial, construct, fae, basically anything, any of those categorizations from the monster manual. The environment or biome they live in, hill, mountain, grassland, Arctic, coastal, forest. Really great ways to customize and narrow down what you're looking at, whether we want to pull from the basic rules, player's handbook, dungeon master's guide, so you can actually narrow down what compendiums you're actually pulling from once you've chosen the official or a homebrew, and you can even select the alignment that they have. So I'm not really going to get too far into that, but I am going to choose environment. So let's say we want a forest environment. We're building actually, you know what? I wonder, is there a city environment? Urban, there is. So let's select urban, because later we're going to be making a real-time map with a photorealistic digital map for city and town random encounters. So it might be nice to kind of keep it on theme here. And it's given us basically a large list of anything that might exist in an urban environment that we can pull from. So now we've got our list of baddies that we can choose from. What do we do then? Let's say, okay, so let's take a look. These are some named ones. We don't really want to do named ones. Okay, let's say we're going to pull a Cambion in there, which is a fiend, a medium-sized fiend. Challenge rating 5. We have a little meter on the right that'll show us the difficulty of that creature based on the character information you put in earlier. So if we hit add to the encounter, it shows up on the left side as 1, and then there's a great little interactive meter that will increase based on how difficult you've made this campaign. So as we show, when we populate that in the creature side, it's showing us that this is now an easy encounter because we only have one CR5 creature in the mix. against 5 level 6 players. So obviously that's going to be an easy encounter. So why don't we jack this up a bit? Let's give them 4 of these. Oh, now 3 is considered deadly. So this is where it gets a little bit fickle, and I would argue that 3 challenge rating 5 creatures are not going to give my players much of a challenge at level 6 because, like I said, their synergy is really good, but it's calling this now a deadly encounter, and that's because it's taken the amount of experience that this creature's valued at and pitted it against the threshold for deadly, which is 7,000 experience. So I might start to ease off a little bit here. The other thing, too, is that this is probably using the multiplier. So one of the feedback items that I would give right away is that I would add an option to either use or discount the multi-creature modifier, because what that does is it effectively makes, now that I've got 2 or more, it makes their challenge rating affect a multiplier of 1.5. So they're actually, it considers them worth 50% more experience against the threshold, which I don't really do. I just kind of call it 1 for 1 because that's what's worked for my party. So this is where you're going to build it out, but you're probably going to have to adjust it a little bit. So let's bring this back down to 1 Cambion. Let's bring in a, let's see, a gladiator from the basic rules. So we'll add a gladiator as like a minion. Maybe we'll do 2 of these. So the Cambion's the leader and 2 gladiators. What we now have is what should be a deadly encounter for our players. That's about the extent of it right now. Like Hillbilly was saying, it would be nice if we could then export these out to a folder. We can at least save the encounter. If we go into the summary tab, it's going to give us a bit of a breakdown where we can put in some text. So short summary, I really do like this. So we'll call this the first encounter the player's experience in Waterdeep. Gives me a little bit of a description on where it is. Encounter description, what I like to do here, and I do this in all my encounter sheets too, is to put tactics in there. So I'll say like, Cambion will lead into battle. Gladiators will always attack weakest target. And then I go a little bit further in here and I bullet out like what abilities they're going to use. So like the gladiators are always going to use. This is from basic rules, so we can actually pull it up. Now, of course, if you're subscribed to Dungeons & Dragons Beyond, you have access to all these compendiums, and you can just click on them. You actually see their abilities in real time. So we got multi-attack, shield bash. What I would do is say, okay, as a reaction, a gladiator can parry. Then in my description, I'm going to say gladiators will always use reaction to parry if available. And then I add tactics like that. So at a glance, I can pull this up and say, okay, this is how that battle should play out. Then there's even a section down here to add treasure and rewards, which I really like. So 20 gold piece each. Gladiators have, spear plus short sword plus buckler. And Cambion has necklace of, fireball. Necklace of fireballs or whatever it is. Pleasant Doom. Angela, sorry guys, breakfast date with hubby. Got a bail. Tell the hubby we said hello. Enjoy your breakfast. Thanks so much for hanging out with us, Angela. The VOD will be available right after the stream, so don't be a stranger. And of course, hopefully that new podcast coming out this weekend if all goes well. So we'll see you soon. We'll see you on the Twitterverse. So that's really a wrap for the Dungeons & Dragons or D&D Beyond Encounter Builder, which is currently in beta. Definitely encourage you to check it out. Jump on D&D Beyond. Log in either with your email or your Twitch account and play around with this thing. It's a lot of fun. And it's also a great way to discover monsters that are under a specific challenge rating. Like I said, I'd use it for that alone if I had to and be perfectly happy with it. So really great tool coming together for D&D Beyond from the folks at Wizards. And look forward to seeing how it evolves from there. The next item on the agenda is the Wizards of the Coast official survey that they released last week. Wizards looking for your opinion on not only how you got into Dungeons & Dragons, but also what interested you in the game or what you find interesting about the game. So as we mentioned, after 5 years of Dungeons & Dragons 5e and 45 years of the game in its current lifespan, Wizards is seeking your opinion on how to improve or how to understand how people are discovering and experiencing the greatest role-playing game in the world. So definitely do check that out too. It's live on the Wizards site, dnd.wizards.com. They ask questions like, what's your favorite campaign setting, how you got started, when and how, why you began playing, how people are discovering the game, and things like that. So it's a great opportunity for you to give your feedback and possibly even affect the future of the game and the hobby that we all know and love. So definitely encourage you to check it out if you haven't done so already. It's fairly quick. We're actually going to go through it right now on stream, so you can see how that plays out live in the moment. Like I said, it's a great opportunity for you to give that feedback back to Wizards of the Coast. We're obviously all very passionate about it. We all have our own opinions about it. So why not take a moment to go in and actually get your voice heard? And we're going to jump into our next topic of conversation, which is the Eberron Oracle of War game prep and materials that are now released. So this is the precursor to the Rising from the Last War module that's being released on November 19th by Wizards of the Coast. So as we mentioned earlier, Adventurers League will typically ramp up a series of adventures, including an epic convention play, usually, that heralds the announce or the release of a new official module. In this case, they're releasing a lot of really great content for the Eberron setting. Now, I'm not terribly familiar with Eberron, but this week they actually released and made available the Oracle of War Player's Guide and the Oracle of War DM's Guide. So I took a quick look through these. They're very light. There are no more than half dozen pages each. So worth kind of taking a look at. If you're going to choose, I would choose to take a look at the Player's Hand Guide. Because it's a little bit more unique to Eberron, whereas the DM's Guide or the guide to run the game contains more of kind of your basic information, how to run a game, how to develop characters, things like that. So the Oracle of War Player's Guide and DM's Guide are now available on the Adventurers League at dndadventurersleague.org. So check it out there if you want. There's lots of good information there on the Adventurers League series that's coming up. As we mentioned last week, they're rolling out a monthly adventure that starts in October. It starts in November, I believe, or it started in October. So they announced what the first 4 concepts are going to be for the first 4 adventures, and they're releasing one every month. It's designed to take the players from level 1 to 20 before the actual when and as the actual compendium comes out. So it's an interesting way to roll this out in a promotional perspective. It's reminiscent of the 2 guides that were made available, reminiscent of the SRC basic rules format that are available on Roll20, and everywhere you get the free rules, even on D&D Beyond. So they take their cues from that. Yes, but it still remains short and sweet, so it doesn't overwhelm you with a lot of knowledge. The Player's Guide, like I was saying, is probably where I'd start. If you have to choose one, go there. The Player's Guide is a great primer for those who are new to the setting and offers a bite-sized preview of what we can likely expect from the officially published materials. While the DM's Guide I felt was a little lackluster, it was a little disappointing, honestly. Not because the information wasn't good, but it's a lot of the same information we've seen in these kind of freemium DM's Guide, which is just how to create character and how to use backstory and how to run a game, things like that. So the DM's Guide is a little lighter. It's more basic. So like I said, I found it a little bit disappointing. It's more of a rehashing of the DM theory and basic approaches to running a game, which are great tools to have. But if you've already kind of done that, I was expecting a little bit more about how to run in the Eberron environment. But I get it, because they don't want to step into the territory that's covered by the official campaign setting materials that they have released and will be releasing in the next couple of weeks. So they're kind of saying, you got to get the books then if you want to run the environment. So I can appreciate that. The official campaign kicks off in December with the first core storyline coming up on DM's Guild, so keep an eye out for that. And these Adventurers League modules, as they're released into the wild, I will certainly look forward to it as well. And that's really a wrap on most of the Dungeons & Dragons news that we had around the verse this week. There's a lot of talk around the Rick and Morty official module, which is also being released on November 19th. I'm going to take a look into that. We'll maybe petition the community to see if they want a bit of a breakdown on the Rick and Morty starter set. So as you know, Wizards has been branding these starter and essential sets. There was one for Stranger Things, one coming out for Rick and Morty. They're kind of tapping into those fandoms by aligning some of their early and starter products to some of these very familiar, iconic IPs, I'll say. So when the Rick and Morty one comes out, we'll take a look. Maybe we'll get into the community, see if we want to do a quick review or breakdown of that. There's going to be a lot of people doing that anyway. So at least we'll cover it from the news perspective. That's it for your Dungeons & Dragons news. Hopefully you enjoyed it. We're going to take a pause here. We're going to go into Unearthed Arcana, where we're going to focus on what was released by Wizards last week in the Unearthed Arcana and playtest material. We're going to focus on the Rune Knight. And then when we come back from the break, we're going to go into live digital map making, stream and YouTube only. But for the podcast, that's a wrap on your D&D news this week. Stay tuned for a live reading of Unearthed Arcana, specifically the Rune Knight. Thanks for hanging out.